I'm Matt Forde and welcome to Unspun, the political equivalent of Match of the Day. All the highlights of the last few days, plus analysis of some truly shocking decision-making. Let's see what's been happening over the weekend. According to a recent poll, over half of UK voters don't know who Tim Faron is. More incredibly, that means that almost half do. The Theresa May party have released their own Take a Break style magazine. Features include how a saucy U-turn on social care saved my marriage and the ghost of my dead husband wants a hard Brexit. And after further questions about senior Labour figures and their links to the IRA, Diane Abbott found a novel way of reframing the debate on Mar this morning.
Do you regret your support for the IRA right back in the 80s?
It was 34 years ago. I had a rather splendid afro at the time. I don't have the same hairstyle. And I don't have the same views.
Diane, that's not what we meant when we said talk about your roots. If Diane slightly missed the point, surely her leader wouldn't, when he was asked about it moments later on Peston.
Lots of people will see that as trivialising a very important shift in her position.
Well, Diane's hairstyle is a matter for Diane.
That's a big enough risk commenting on your current girlfriend's hair, let alone getting in a row about your exes. Still to come on Unspun, I'll take you through some of the weird and weirder parts of UKIP's Manifesto, a document which, rather like an abusive letter left on a car windscreen, has you asking the question, who would write such a thing? Plus, Suzanne Evans will be here, the woman who wrote UKIP's Manifesto. As always, I'm joined by my house band of politicians and guest musicians. We tried to make them go to recess. They said, no, no, no. It's MP4. As you know, Kev, Greg and Pete are off campaigning for their seats, so standing in for them tonight, we have, on drums from Sisu, it's Steffan Owens. On guitar from Maximo Park, it's Duncan Lloyd. On mouth organ, ex-Lib Dem MP Lembit Opik. And on bass, our very own ex-Labour MP Ian Causey. Gentlemen, all of you, welcome to the show. Ian, as the only Labour member on the stage, we do have to ask, do you have any links to the IRA?
Well, you know, a bit of fundraising. I think we all did that, didn't we? But I can say nothing since my hair went grey.
Lembit, why aren't you standing in the election this time?
I'm a Lib Dem. What's the point?
Fellas, thank you very much. After a pause in campaigning following the terrorist attack in Manchester, one party decided to start early.
While the majority of election campaigning has been suspended until tomorrow, UKIP have launched their manifesto today.
Either they're defiant pioneers showing that terrorists can't disrupt our way of life, or they're opportunists trying to gain an advantage. Make your own mind up that it's the second one. The launch was a polite, low-key affair defined by British good manners.
It sounds like you're near as damn it blaming the Prime Minister for this attack and the circumstances that led to it.
Is that the BBC? Yeah. Is that the BBC? Down your hole. Crawl back down your hole, UKIP MEP Stuart Agnew told the BBC political editor.
Don't you understand English?
Right, calm down, fellas. This isn't the Labour Party. The manifesto itself contains more dog whistles than Shepherd's Equipment Monthly, but shows an attempt to learn from Marine Le Pen's detoxification of Le Front National, trying to appear to a more mainstream audience. So, how did UKIP's new progressive pitch start?
11 billion a year spending increase for the NHS and adult social care by the end of the next Parliament.
Wow, that is a, dare I say it, left-wing policy. So where's the money going to come from?
That increase matches the reduction we are pledged to make in foreign aid spending.
In short, it's nationalism mixed with socialism. If only there was a term to describe such a thing. UKIP wants to promote ethical trade instead of provide international aid, and say in their manifesto that this will be a far better way to help developing nations lift themselves out of poverty and become self-sufficient. Even Bono has now admitted it. Even Bono. Is that the level that we're at? Yeah, sod the OBR, the IFS and the World Bank. What does a tax-efficient leprechaun think? The difficulty with reframing your arguments is if you get it wrong, it can make you look absolutely crazy. For example, UKIP still want to ban the burqa, but their reason is that clothing that hides identity and prevents intake of essential vitamin D from sunlight is not liberating. It's about health. In a way, they do have a point. Muslim women in Britain don't get enough vitamin D because nobody in Britain gets enough vitamin D. If you're worried about the science of it, don't worry, it's true. Even Bono has admitted it. Donald Trump was at NATO this week, pushing around world leaders like he was trying to get served in a prison canteen. Something he's going to need to get good at. So, what's he got to say for himself?
Thank you all. I've had a busy week. I was at the G7 summit this week with a load of other leaders. It's called the G7 because you got to meet the 7 most powerful people in the world. And you're like, G7? I met them all. So many. I've had 7 international liaisons in a hotel in one day before, but it cost me. I saw all the NATO leaders, the German president, Mrs. Merkel, the new French president, Mr. Macaroni. You know, he married his teacher. I said, dude, that's only cool if you're the teacher and the student is a chick, like a hot chick, like Ivanka. They say I offended this Montenegrin. Mr. Negrin, if you're out there, Monty, I apologize. Melania had a photo with all the wives of the world leaders. What a bunch of women they were. Like one of my beauty competitions, but older, not as hot, less concerned about world peace. There was a dude trying to get in on the photo. Turns out, not only is he married to the leader of Luxembourg, but the leader of Luxembourg is a man. I said, what the hell is going on in Europe? Don't you people know that marriage is a special union between a man and his hot daughter, wife? Okay, folks, I gotta go. Thank you so much.
Part of the great tradition of British politics is the existence of smaller parties. Some campaign on single issues. Others are novelty outfits, such as the Fancy Dress Party, the Church of the Militant Elvis Party, and the Liberal Democrats. They all deserve a fair crack of the whip, so here to saddle up and take us for a horse-drawn ride through Democracy Town is our analyst, Andy Zaltzman. Andy, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Talk us through these electoral no-hopers.
Well, I like to think of them as some hopers, Matt. Anything is possible these days. Bear in mind, just 2 years ago, I put this accumulator bet on Trump for president, Brexit, Leicester City winning the Premier League...
Wow.
...and George Osborne winning Eurovision.
So close.
That seemed the most obvious one at the time, but...
So who are the smaller parties that might spring a surprise?
Well, Matt, prominently unprominent are the Women's Equality Party. Sign me up for that. I will vote for anything that drags my wife down to my level of incompetence. We still have the British National Party still clinging on desperately to the Strife support machine. They are, of course, the only party, Matt, to be named after what would happen if they ever officially disband.
A British National Party?
Exactly, yeah. And still barking at the electoral moon, we have the monster-raving loony party as well, who will, of course, be buoyed by the results in America last November. Then you've got single-issue parties, like the No More Single-Issue Parties party.
But they put themselves out of business if they succeeded.
The Nigel Farage blueprint. and also the Bring Back Hanging party.
Well, it's one way around the social care crisis.
Testify. And philosophically, it's not actually that much further down the logical road from what the Tories have already suggested.
Are there any other parties we haven't heard of yet?
Yes, UKIP.
I think we've heard of it.
No, not that one. The other one, the UK Interdependence Party, which acknowledges how all nations rely on each other in this complex 21st century globalised global globe.
They won't get anywhere. It's too grounded in reality.
That is a big weakness in today's politics.
What is the point, though, of voting for smaller parties if they're not likely to get in?
Well, what is the point of voting for most parties in most constituencies, Matt? Voting pointlessly is what British democracy is all about. And remember, the first rule of common sense voting, never vote for anyone who might win. By voting for a guaranteed loser, you give yourself constitutional carte blanche to whinge, gripe and bleat about everything the so-called government does for the next 5 years. Do not part up that priceless democratic freedom lightly, Britain.
That's what we fought those world wars for.
Precisely. Precisely. 3 of them. 2 hot, 1 cold.
Andy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy Zaltzman. Never I told you that I had video footage of politicians spilling parliamentary secrets, including confessions of vice, how much would you give me? Luckily, I'm not a soulless mercenary working for a tabloid. Put your money away. This is On the House.
Well, I don't want to go into too much detail about sewage inlets.
It's old. It's got creatures in it, not just MPs, but also mice.
The IT system.
You've got this fibre optic cabling gaffer taped to Edwardian electrical cabling, which is why everyone's paranoid it's going to burn down again.
There are many aspects of Parliament which are flummery and fakery.
This doffing of the hats.
The robes.
The men in Parliament that wear tights and swords.
The whole thing is a bit of pantomime.
Is it remotely likely that I would tell you? No question about that. Gluttony.
Cheese. Chocolate.
Big box of Maltesers. Junk food.
KFC, Tennessee fried chicken, Dixie fried chicken. I just love chicken and chips.
I like an odd flutter on the horses.
Smoking cigars. I love them.
I'll be back after the break when I'll be joined by the former Today programme and Woman's Hour journalist who defected from the Conservatives to UKIP, Suzanne Evans. Welcome back to Unspun. Now it's time for my special guest. If I asked you to guess which party a former journalist for Woman's Hour and founder of a health charity supported, you'd probably never get the answer right. Please welcome the author of UKIP's Manifesto and former member of the Liberal Metropolitan Elite, Suzanne Evans.
I love those guys. They're great.
Suzanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you. You are such a naughty boy, you know. I spent 4 weeks of my life writing this manifesto. I'm shut in a darkened room. The amount of sunlight I didn't get, I might as well have been in a burqa. and you know, you can't... And you rip it to shreds in 2 minutes. I'm so upset.
Well, I mean, I'm not... I don't know if you've been watching the news, but others have got there before me.
Yeah, people do tend to do that, unfortunately.
Well, in terms of the manifesto, there are certain elements that we highlighted. This idea that banning the burqa is to protect people so that they can produce enough vitamin D. I mean, is there any science behind this?
There is, actually. I know this is a comedy show, but being serious for just 2 seconds, there was some research done in 2011 at a hospital in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and I think they looked at 465 women aged between 19 and 40. And how many do you think had vitamin D deficiency?
I've got no idea.
What percentage? Have a guess. Anyone? 100%. Every single one had vitamin D deficiency, and it causes osteoporosis, diabetes, heart disease. So it's a serious issue.
But is it linked to the wearing of any sort of face covering?
Well, it's not just the face covering, it's the whole, you know, in Saudi Arabia, it's the whole thing. But, of course,
But
when you're wearing a
now.
burqa, you don't go out with just a burqa, do you, and the rest of you naked?
I don't know,
you
do
know,
you?
It's part and parcel. Well, you might, Matt, but you disguised it very well.
But why... I mean, but surely Domino's delivery drivers are more at risk. hands, head, the lot.
I think they go on the beach in the holidays, but I love those guys, by the way. I think anybody, seriously, I think anybody that will get on a bike and deliver pizza, it's not the best job in the world, is it? I take my hat on them. When I'm driving around and I see those guys delivering, I just get out of the way, I give them lots of space. You know, I think they're great guys.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of an inversion of Norman Tebbett's get on his bike and my dad got on his bike and delivered pizzas.
Yeah.
Sort of version. But you were in the Conservatives for a while. And you worked on Woman's Hour and you worked for the BBC. I mean, how does a woman who's living in London, working for the BBC, end up joining and being a senior part of UKIP?
Well, that's a very good question, but I think, you know, why wouldn't somebody do that when become UKIP? I mean, people have lots of, I think, misapprehensions about UKIP, and that's not to say we don't have our problems. We do. Every political party does. But for me, it's about, well, first and foremost, it was about getting out of the European Union. You know, that was what I wanted to do. I played a lead part in the Vote Leave campaign at the referendum, very proud of what we did. And we won, and we managed to make the case and persuaded the British people. So that, for me, was the real reason, because I didn't see the Conservative Party at that time actually grasping that particular bull by the horns and getting on with it.
Although it was a Conservative Prime Minister that delivered that referendum and sort of in a roundabout way, you've got the Tories to
Yes, that was really funny, wasn't it, actually? David Cameron thought he'd shoot UKIP's fox by saying, right, I'm going to give you a referendum, and then poor bloke never expected to have to deliver on it, did he?
It's been quite effective in neutralising UKIP, hasn't it? Because since the vote to leave, UKIP's poll ratings have collapsed. I mean, do you think UKIP will ever get back to the level of popularity you were at 2 years ago?
Well, who knows? You know, if I had a crystal ball, I'd be a very rich woman because I'd be gambling every night. You know, I think we have to say that UKIP's whole reason for being was because we wanted to get out of the European Union. And I think there's definitely a sense now that people think, well, that's on the way, we've triggered Article 50, that's going to happen, UKIP's no use anymore. But I really hope that we can go forward because, and I'm certainly going to play my part to make that happen, because I think there is a real need for another party in British politics that isn't Tory and isn't Labour. I see failings in both parties. People are always saying, oh, you know, go back to the Tories or join Labour or whatever. But no, I couldn't do that because I just don't support either party. There is a need for a common sense, centre ground, radical party like UKIP that actually...
I think you have people until the final part.
That actually, you know, talks about the issues that nobody else is prepared to talk about.
But it's about...
And we do that very well, actually. We can push people's buttons and get people talking. Even if we haven't got a single MP in the House of Commons, my goodness, we still manage to help set the political agenda.
You do talk about the things that people don't talk about, but you talk about them in a way that other people wouldn't talk about them. In terms of UKIP's heart and soul, in terms of its international ideas, do you take strength from the victory of Trump and from the almost victory of Le Pen, or are they people you wouldn't want to be associated with?
Personally, no. There are some in UKIP who think Trump's the best thing since sliced bread, and Le Pen, and there are other people like me who really aren't quite so sure, and the jury's definitely out. But again, that's quite interesting. I remember when Hillary Clinton failed to get elected in America, I had journalists on the phone to me constantly saying, will you take part in a debate that this is a failure for women? You know, this is dreadful. This woman hasn't got elected. It shows how sexism is still rife in our society. But funnily enough, nobody asked me to do the same kind of thing when Le Pen didn't win in France. And so I think there is a hypocrisy here as well.
But there are UKIP figures that have been very close to Mr Trump. Nigel Farage has been in his golden lift and keeps having dinner with him, and other party figures do as well. I mean, in terms of your relationship with Nigel Farage, it was a difficult one, wasn't it? Because you were favourite to be the London mayoral candidate for UKIP. You're a popular figure publicly, and you were suspended coincidentally during the period where you would have been the mayoral candidate.
Coincidentally for calling out homophobia in the party. Yeah.
So
what happened? I don't know. I think perhaps other people are better qualified to comment on it than me, but it was odd.
But I mean, you're better qualified to comment on it than anyone else in this room, so let's at least ask you. I mean, do you think that was Nigel Farage effectively blocking you from being the candidate?
Yes, I do. Yes, beyond a shadow of a doubt, yes. Although I know he denies it, but nobody else could have done it.
See, this is what's fascinating, is how is UKIP having this sort of bizarre relationship with Nigel now? Because some of the party seems to want him back, and yet it seems that actually he was organising against senior, major popular figures in the party.
You know, Nigel's great. Whatever differences we might have had, I have to pay respect to him because he fought for nearly 25 years on a Eurosceptic platform, taking a lot of abuse purely for wanting to get out of the European Union. And he stuck by his guns and he kept fighting and he kept fighting and he kept fighting. And I admire anybody that can do that.
Suzanne, we asked our politicians earlier what was their major vice.
I love my food. I probably eat too much.
And any food in particular?
Oh, anything.
Oh, that's a politician's answer. This is like Gordon Brown and Mum's Neck.
Yeah, I think anything with sugar in it, yeah. And I tell you what, they say it's almost as addictive as crack cocaine. But I don't know, because I've never had crack cocaine.
Oh, so close, Suzanne.
Or any kind of cocaine.
Suzanne, it's been an absolute
Great
pleasure.
to see you
Thank you
again,
so much for
Matt.
joining us.
Thank
Ladies and
you.
gentlemen, Suzanne Evans. That's all we've got time for tonight. We're here every Wednesday and Sunday until the election, interviewing candidates and political figures from all parties. I'll leave you with an absolute banger from the best band in the world. Even Bono has admitted it. It's MP4.